Welcome everyone to the Basics of Podcasting Session 2. In this session, we will go over Audacity as an editing platform, and then we'll transition over to a tutorial on how to do really the basic 5 functions of editing. If there is a lot more interest, then I can follow up with another workshop on a bit more complicated editing process in the future. And then finally, we will conclude with uploading to a listening platform, which is in this case, Soundcloud. So for this workshop, we'll be focusing on Audacity, which is a free audio editing program. And this program works both with Windows or PC and a Mac. And to download, I've included the link here, and I've also included a manual if you want to spend some time going through all of the features, since this is a really basic editing tutorial, and I'm not going to go through everything because it is pretty extensive. Before we begin with the tutorial, I want to spend a quick minute talking about working with different audio files. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're working with 2 different files. The first is WAV, and the second is MP3/MP4. And the difference between the 2 files is that an MP3/MP4 is a compressed file, and that's the file that we will be exporting into. Whereas a WAV is uncompressed, and it's going to allow us to manipulate the audio and fade in, fade out, and split, and do really cool things for the podcast. And to switch between files, especially if you're choosing, like we talked about in the first workshop, an interview style, documentary style, and working with a lot of pre-recorded audio, you're going to need a switch. So I've included a link here that'll do all the hard work for you. You literally will drag and drop either a WAV or an MP3 and work between the 2. And towards the end of the tutorial, I'll show you how it all sort of comes together in the end. And some of the basic audio editing steps that we will learn in this session is obviously how to record your own narration, how to delete, so whether you're deleting extra audio, a mistake that you made, or for example, with music, if it's way too long, I'll show you how to delete that. I'll also show you how to split audio, and that's going to be really important, especially if you are like me and like to record in one shot, get it all done. Splitting will be really helpful because it'll allow you to take one track and create sort of bite-sized tracks. So you can have your introduction as a track, then you can have, for example, your topic 1 as a track, and likewise throughout the rest of the show, all the way to the end. And then I will show you how to fade in and fade out for music or narration, and then work with multiple tracks. So right here, multi-tracks. For the live tutorial, I will show you how to work with 2 different tracks. The first is live narration, and then the second is music. And to that point, I've included a royalty-free link because that is super important. You want to be using royalty-free music so you can avoid any legal trouble, which I strongly recommend. So for the purposes of this tutorial, I'll be using royalty-free music just to demonstrate how it all sort of comes together. And I will begin with the tutorial. I'm actually going to switch over to Audacity so we can begin. All right, so this is Audacity. For those who haven't downloaded or who have, you can sort of follow along with me. But this is the basic screen that you will see when you begin recording. So before we actually jump out into the deep with recording, I want to go over a few buttons that are really important for podcast editing. The first is actually over here. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'll be using my built-in microphone, but if you have an external microphone, this is actually where you want to make sure that it pops up. So make sure that you plug in your USB microphone and make sure that you're selecting what it is. And then something else to consider is whether you want to record in mono or stereo. So typically most vocal narration is recorded in mono, but I actually use stereo because I like to work with music, and most music is actually uploaded in stereo. And I'm a perfectionist, so I want all of my tracks to look the same. So that means 2 tracks per one thing that you're working on, whether that's music or whether that's an interview or live narration. And then some important buttons for really, really basic editing. The first is your selection tool, and I will demonstrate a bunch on how to use that. Another is the envelope tool, and that actually will allow you to fade in and fade out and get really sort of nitpicky about where you want your audio to come in or out. The next is one of my favorites, which is the time shift tool. And that'll allow you to actually shift either your music or your audio back and forth so that it all lines up pretty perfectly. And then lastly, over here, one of my favorites is sort of the fit to screen tool, which is right here. And that allows you, especially when you're working with multiple tracks, to see everything in one screen, which can be really, really difficult, especially if you're working with a 45-minute interview, right? You want to actually be able to see how long the track is and make sure that you actually have your music that's going out through the entire podcast. So really helpful. And then sort of our basic audio recording tools. The first, of course, is record, which I will demonstrate briefly. And then one of my favorites, skip to start. I really like this when I'm working with 2 or more tracks so that I'm able to start from the beginning and listen through for any mistakes. And then one of the most important for editing is actually the stop button. It's really important because if you decide to click pause instead of stop, you actually are going to be locked out of all of your editing tools. So I always say, when in doubt, always click stop instead of pause, and then finally the play button. So with that being said, we're actually going to jump right in there and record. So if you were with us for our first workshop, I talked a bit about script writing, which for me is really helpful because I like to have some major points that I cover. So I'm actually going to return to one of the scripts that I showed in last week's session to record our introduction. So we're going to start off with the record button, and I'm actually using another computer that I'm going to be reading off of for the script. So for those who like to be heavily scripted, I recommend either, for example, your phone or an iPad or another computer, and you're going to have multiple screens that you're working with. Okay, so starting to record. Welcome to Tell Your Story Walking. I'm Amy Lau, your host, a Yonkers native, a historian, and I enjoy talking to people who stop by Tibbetts Park. On this show, I tell stories of other people. Here, I share what brought me to the park and chat with folks from all walks of life and what brings them to the park as well. This episode, we'll meet Larry Locks, a local Yonkers grandfather who came to Tibbetts with his granddaughter, Jasmine. During the course of the conversation, Larry discusses his former job as a banker, his arrival in Yonkers in 1993, and his participation in the desegregation case as an NAACP supporter. You will hear the impact the case had on his life, what lessons he shares with Jasmine during their afternoon at the park. So please turn up the volume and grab your favorite sneakers for an afternoon stroll, because this is Tell Your Story Walking. So as you can see, it's about a minute long, which is typically where you'd like to be for an introduction, so not too fast, but just enough to give listeners a bit more about introducing yourself, who you'll have on the show, and really what you'll be talking about. So with that being said, you want to go back to the beginning and sort of listen to how it sounds. So I will play back the audio. Welcome to Tell Your Story Walking. I'm Amy Lau, your host, a Yonkers native, a historian, and I enjoy talking to people who stop by Tibbetts Park. All right, so it sounds pretty clear and crisp. I like the way it sounds. So with that being said, if you are recording a much longer piece of narration, you'll keep going. But for the interest of this sort of condensed tutorial, I'm going to leave it there and just work with the introduction. So now that I have my introduction and my audio track here, what I want to do is actually put in some music, because if you listen to a lot of podcasts like myself, a lot of podcasts start off with music and then the narration comes in next. So what I'm going to do is click File, Import, Audio. And with that, it's going to pop up with some of my music that I've downloaded, and all 3 tracks are royalty-free music. But for this podcast, I'm going to choose this one. So it's that simple, right? It's going to sort of download and it's going to pop up in its own track. So as you can see, this track is about 3 minutes and 30 seconds, and my narration's really only about a minute, right? So what I'm going to do next is show you all how to delete. and it's actually really simple. So here I'm going to click a little bit out past where my audio is so I can sort of be a perfectionist and manipulate the audio. And how to delete is you're going to click inside the track and then highlight everything else that you want to get rid of, which ends right here, and simply click delete. That's simple. So you highlight, you click, and then you delete. And then now we have this much audio to work with. So what I like to do is actually click this fit to project to width. So now I can see the entire project on my screen. So next, what most people do is you want to have a little bit of music. And right now, the two tracks, they start at the same time, so they'd be competing, right? So what we want to do is actually shift the narration back a little bit so we actually hear just the music first. So what I recommend is actually going up here and you're going to click mute. So now it's going to be a sort of a dark gray, and that means that it's silent. So now we're only going to be able to hear the music. So it says solo. So now we're going to go down here and learn how to fade in and fade out and a little bit more of deleting. I don't like sort of the pre-recorded fade out, so I'm actually going to highlight this and then delete. So it snaps back to the beginning, and now we have our music sort of really loud, as you can see from the waves here. So what we're going to want to do now is fade out so that the narration gets really loud. So what you'll do here is actually click the envelope tool, and it's actually going to give you some dots. So here I want it to be really loud. So we'll go out, say 2 seconds. And I will begin to create some dots so that we can begin to shrink the audio. So right about here is where it's really loud and I actually want it to get quiet. So we're going to begin to shrink the audio just a little bit. And if it shrinks really low, you just create another dot and keep making it smaller. So you'll still hear the music. It'll just be a little bit quieter. So then you're going to begin to just fade out a little bit more. So I like to come down right about here until it all kind of funnels down to be a bit more seamless. Next, you're gonna click out of the envelope now that we've created the fade in and fade out. And I'm gonna unclick solo because now I wanna actually hear both tracks. So to make sure that I don't scare you all with competing tracks, what we're gonna do is actually come over and click this time shift tool. And we're gonna work with this one and actually shift it just back enough to where we created that fade out. So we've moved it back just a little bit, and I like to have it kind of a little bit early so that it sounds a bit more seamless. So we'll come back over here and start from the beginning and see how it sounds. Welcome to Tell Your Story Walking. I'm Amy Lowe, your host, a Yonkers native, a historian, and I enjoy talking to people who stop by Tibbetts Park. On this show, I tell stories. All right, so we hear a little bit, and it went from kind of loud with the music to really kind of quiet once our narration comes in, which is what we really want, right? So at this point, we're working with two. We faded it out and in, and then we also worked a little bit with deleting. So one of the things that happens a lot if you're working with scripts is sometimes you might cough or sneeze or make a mistake, and you want to actually split the track up to actually re-record a piece. So that's what I'm going to show you next. And it's pretty simple. Here, I do a lot of podcasting, so I can know where the dead space is. But you're actually, if you're new to podcasting, you have to listen to it and hear where that awkward pause is. So here's a good place where I kind of took a breath, and you're going to want to click inside the track and then come over to edit, clip boundaries, and split. And that you actually just split the audio file. And how you want to make sure that you did it correctly is you come over to your time shift tool, and then you simply go back. So you see already that you split the track that was 1 into 2. And that's really helpful, like I said, if you cough randomly or you sneeze, or you want to actually go back and fix a piece that doesn't sound that great. So since I didn't do that, we're actually going to shift it back because I like the way it sounds. And one of the cool things about Audacity is it automatically, as you can see when it's yellow, will snap it together so that there's no gaps. And that's what I really like is it saves you a lot of time and hassle by automatically syncing the audio together. So now that we've learned how to separate tracks, I'm actually going to go back to my selection tool. And then, for example, let's say that you are recording for 45 minutes, you want to take a break and then pick up where you left off. You're going to need to re-record. So what we're going to do is actually fit the project, and we're going to come over here to mute the music because I want to work just with narration in case I want to record something new. And you click literally, if you stop recording right here and want to pick up where you left off, you're going to click right where it starts, and then you are going to click Shift R, and it started recording. So if I want to end, for example, I would say, thank you so much for listening to Tell Your Story Walking. Please check out ypl.org for more information. Okay. We click stop. And as you can see, it created a whole other file down here. I personally like to keep all of my files where they belong. So if this was an interview, this third track would be just for the interview. So I wouldn't want my narration in the third track. So what you can do is actually highlight the piece of audio that you're working with, like here, and then, there we go. And you're gonna copy, and we're actually going to move it. So we're going to go up to the first track, click where we left off, and paste it. And it's that simple. So if you want to add in another piece of information that you might have left off or pick up, it's just that simple. You're going to click Shift R, automatically record. And if you want to leave it in a separate track, that's okay. But if you are like me and want to keep everything together, you're just going to copy and paste it like I did and move it up. And then you're actually going to go back down here and get rid of that extra piece of information because you don't want it and it is confusing. But since this was a completely imaginary, I'm going to get rid of it because we don't need it. Great, so now we are back to what we had. And imagine this is much longer than what it is. At the end of your podcast, you're going to want to fade out. So I initially showed you how to use the envelope tool to fade out, but now hopefully you won't be too upset with me. I'm going to show you a really easy way to do that. So here's our music that we now can unmute, and here's an extra piece that doesn't mesh with our audio. So we're actually going to delete it. So now we're all synced up. So for those who are not like me and just wanted to have sort of an easy way to fade out, you're going to highlight the part you want to fade out and simply come to Effects and Fade Out. It does all the hard work for you and no sort of nitpicking with the dots. So here we're going to do the same thing with the audio and then click Effect and Fade Out. So now we've faded our tracks and now it's at the end. So let's stop, let's see here, and listen to how the fade starts. Favorite sneakers for an afternoon stroll, because this is Tell Your Story Walking. So as you can see, it did it for us, no envelope tool and really simple. So in this sort of live version, we went over how to record your narration, how to add in your music from royalty-free website that I uploaded, how to over here split the track, and then how to fade in and out. So I'm actually gonna transition over to a pre-recorded podcast that I did that has literally the same music and the same narration, but I wanted to show you how it sounds with another track. So this one has 4 and actually includes the interview that I conducted. So we'll start from the beginning and I'll let you have a listen, and then I will talk you through some of the things that I did for this one. Welcome to Tell Your Story Walking. I'm Amy Lowe, your host, a Yonkers native, a historian, and I enjoy talking to people who stop by Tibbetts Park. On this show, I tell the stories of other people. I share what brought me to the park and chat with folks from all walks of life and what brings them to the park as well. This episode, we will meet Larry Locks, a local Yonkers grandfather who came to Tibbetts with his granddaughter Jasmine. During the course of the conversation, Larry discussed his job as a former banker, his arrival in Yonkers in 1993, and his participation in the desegregation case as an NAACP supporter. You will hear the impact of the case on his life and what lessons he shares with Jasmine during their afternoon at the park. So please, turn up your volume, grab your favorite sneakers for an afternoon stroll, because this is Tell Your Story Walking.
If I had had no credentials in my pocket, I would have been in jail that night. Middle class, 37-year-old father of 2 children, doing nothing more than jogging. And that's not the only time it happened to me. Well, if it would happen to me, imagine what would happen to a 17-year-old Black kid in the inner city.
To hear the rest of this interview and episode, make sure to check out ypl.org if you haven't already, to hear more about the life and legacy of Larry Locks. Before you go, let me know what you think by leaving a comment. And stay tuned for the next episode where we go on a long walk with local podcast enthusiast Michael Walsh. This is Tell Your Story Walking. All right, so that's really quick. It's about 2 minutes long, but it really demonstrates how you work with multiple tracks. So I literally kept the same introduction, the same music, and the only thing that's a bit different is with this third track, this is the interview. So the same process with the music, I brought it in, and of course the interview was an hour long, but for sort of the intro, I cut it down to really about 30 seconds, and then a fourth track, which is how I wanted to conclude the episode, which is again my narration. It's really that simple. I really love in a future podcasting workshop to show you a bit more complicated editing with sort of different and multiple interviews. But this is a really great way to start. And once you've sort of worked through your trial run and want to see how it sounds, I'm going to show you how to export. And it's pretty simple. So I like the way it sounds. I think it sounds good. I shout out Mike Walsh, which is great. And then you're going to come here to export. And for the purposes of your podcast, you are going to want to export as an MP3, which is a compressed file. So you come here and you're going to decide how you want to save it. For your title, I'm going to save it as this one. Where you want to save it, I'm choosing desktop, and I want to save it as an MP3 file. And here are your formatting options. The best is always preset because it's going to control when things start and end. Your quality, I prefer standard. Anything below standard, your quality is going to be not that great. And anything above standard, your file is going to be really big. And if you're like me and you work, you don't want to overtake your laptop with really large audio files because they definitely do begin to sort of pile up. Variable speed is going to be fast. And then of course, joint stereo, so you can hear in both ears. And now we're gonna save. It will tell you that your tracks will be mixed down and exported as one stereo file, which is exactly what you want. So you click OK. And then this is actually really important. Here is where you're going to include your metadata tags. And I'll talk a bit more about this when I transition over to uploading your podcast to SoundCloud. This is actually where you're going to add in all your information. So you can also change it and put, for example, your name, what you want to have the podcast titled as, its number, year, and genre, because these are all going to be tags that are used when people Google, for example, your work. So with that being said, I'm going to leave it clear because I'll fill it in on SoundCloud and click OK. And since it's a really short podcast, I'm done. It's that simple. So now that is going to be on my desktop for me to transition over to SoundCloud to upload. So now that I'm done with this, I'm going to briefly stop sharing and show you how to work with the file. So here's where we're going to go for uploading your podcast to SoundCloud. Here is a pre-recorded podcast that I did about scholarships in Yonkers. And we're actually going to go to the live website just to make sure that we work through all of the steps for it. So I'm going to transition over and hopefully you'll be able to see my screen in 1 second. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. So when you come to SoundCloud, once you log in, this is actually your main homepage and something that I've already recorded. And for the purposes of showing you how to upload, it's pretty simple. You're going to go to upload, and I've already included what I would like it to be. So this is the interview. Clearly, I need to come up with something a little bit more inspirational. So we'll go with tell your story walking episode 1. For genre, you can decide what you want it to be, and you also can customize it. So typically you can put customize, and you can put, what I prefer is historical podcast. And then you can put additional tags. So for example, you can put Yonkers, you can put all kinds of things. And that's actually how people are going to be able to find you when you're hashtagging or connecting to other social media. And then I also talked in our first session about a description for your podcast. So this is where you'll copy and paste that. And then you can also put a caption. So one of the things that I would put is interview with Larry Box. And that's what I would want so that people know who I'm interviewing. And then here you can choose public, private, or scheduled. And this is really important for those who actually have a series and want to put out multiple podcasts. And then you can literally schedule when the next one will be uploaded if you're putting, for example, 3 in at a time. But since this is all fake, I'm going to go with private. So only myself, I can see it. But when you're ready to share, you can make it public. And for those who want to start private, you can. So you can get some feedback from those who you trust. And then you actually can go back and then make it public once you're ready to share the story with people. And then you save. And I am going to upload my file. And here's podcast. And here's the podcast that I want to upload. So it's processing, but while it's doing that, we can re-put in what we want the title to be, and it is okay. And then here I want to upload an image. And one of the things that we discussed in the first session is typically you want to have some sort of artwork or sort of photo to match. And it's really good, especially if you want to promote on social media. So I am going to upload the photo of Larry with his granddaughter, which I thought was really sweet. And hopefully other people will too, and click on it. And after you do that, you're going to save. And here is actually where you can begin to start sharing with people because now it's complete. And this is the link that you'll use to share with people. So once you have that, you actually can embed it on your Instagram, your Facebook, your own personal website, or a blog. And with that being said, I will stop sharing for a second to answer any questions from those. I know I saw something pop up in the chat. Oh, I'm sorry, Dean, do you have a question? I guess not. Does anyone else have a question for how to work through either uploading or the current? Yes, Angela, this is the second session, but the great thing is we've already uploaded the first session onto YPL's YouTube channel. So if you want to go to YPL on YouTube, you'll pop it up and it will be there for our first workshop. So after this, you're more than welcome to go onto YouTube, watch the first one, and then Dean, I saw you thought I was going a bit fast. This one will also go up, so you can actually re-listen to this session and the first at your convenience. Mike, if you're able to put that link, that would be great.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone? Okay. So with that being said, we love feedback. So there is an opportunity to comment on the YouTube page and tell us more about what you'd like to hear, whether that's an additional session that talks a bit more about other projects that you can do, whether you're focused on historical sort of things, whether it's music, I can also show you multiple ways to sort of incorporate different voices. And Angela has a question. What is a podcast? So a podcast is really sort of, I would say, think about radio, or if you like NPR, it's really sort of a story that you're listening to that doesn't have any visuals, all audio. Right? And you can listen to it. Podcasts are posted literally all over. So I showed SoundCloud, which is one place that you can listen to podcasts. There are a few other places. Google has one. There are some people who post their podcasts on YouTube, on their blog pages. So there are multiple ways that you can engage, but a podcast is really simple. It's just storytelling that you're listening to that's not sort of sponsored, for example, by an organization, right? So NPR, other things that have different sort of legal departments that can control what is being said. Most podcasters do have some sponsorship opportunities, but there are a lot of folks like me who just like telling stories and don't have any sort of financial support, which would sort of manipulate what stories are being told or clearances in the story itself. I hope that answers your question, Angela.
Yeah, I have a quick question, right? In terms of the metadata that you did, right?
Yes.
Suppose I did it in the software and I want to upload it to, let's say, to the SoundCloud. Is the same format is going to be uploaded into it, or is going to be you have to like later on edit it?
Yes, I'm really glad you asked that. So you can actually do it in Audacity, or if you want to do it in GarageBand, but you'll have to redo it once you upload to the listening software, because it's not all going to transfer over. So that's why I kind of like just to clear everything before I upload, and then wait till I get to whatever streaming or listening platform and re-enter it, because you're going to have to do it again anyway. And why do something twice? Does that answer your question, Dean?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
Okay. And I saw a question from Angela. Where can I get free sound effects and music? So earlier in the presentation, I gave a link where you can get plenty of royalty-free music. And if you actually go back to, I think Mike posted it already, our first session, I gave a few links where you can actually choose different royalty-free music that I actually really like, because a lot of websites will give you royalty-free music, but you have to either register or pay. And these ones I've already screened, and there are no financial responsibilities. And the cool thing with Audacity with sound effects is I am kind of weird and I like to pick and choose. So one place where you can get free sound effects is actually YouTube. If you want rain or you want a car honking, you can record that and then take that file. And that's why it's really important to use that link I gave between switching between MP3 and WAV files, because it's going to come up as an MP3. You can switch it to WAV, and you already know from this workshop how to import that information. So YouTube's a great place. For those who have Macs, GarageBand actually has a lot of free sound effects. And for Audacity, they only have about 3 or 4, so not that great. But like I said, there are a bunch of websites, especially on royalty-free music, where you can search for different sound effects for cars honking, or ambient noise like a cafe, or all different kinds of things. A lot of royalty-free music will allow you to switch between the music itself and free sound effects. So if you want to check those out, you can look at the link that Mike posted. And then also when this one goes up on YouTube, I posted another link to royalty-free music that will also include sound effects. Any other questions?
One question. How can I get like a student version to the software?
So Audacity is free for everyone. So it doesn't matter what age group, you can literally download it and it's completely free. And that's why we used it for this particular workshop. And if you go to, I think it's audacityteam.org, you can download it. So whether it's trial or not, it's free and you can use it right away. GarageBand, unfortunately, is only for Mac products, but it will come with your actual laptop. So again, it's also free if you have that type of computer or iPad.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for joining, and I hope that you check out both of our links once they go up. Please feel free to comment. We take your comments really seriously, and I hope that you'll give me another opportunity to provide a bit more advanced audio editing podcasting. Thank you so much for joining, and I will turn this back over to Michael.
Oh, there's actually a comment in the chat box from Angela. Angela, did you want to ask something?
How did I get started with this? So a couple years ago, and by couple I mean like 10, my major in undergrad was television, radio, and film. And radio was kind of on its way out, and podcasting was definitely on its way in. So I started working with podcasting then, in addition to actually film and other mediums, just because I realized that folks have all different ways that they want to engage with learning. So some like to be visual and audio. Others prefer just audio because you can listen to it as you're driving, as you're jogging, and sort of continue on with your day compared to like sitting and actually watching something. So just another way to sort of engage with different audiences. Michael, I think there was a question for you.
So what does it say? What interested you? Yeah, so I've always enjoyed listening to podcasts too, whether it's driving in my car or going for walks. It's just, something that I like listening to. Because there's podcasts on so many different topics out there, that I found so many that I enjoy listening to. And, there's tons of really good stuff out there that, you can do a little bit of research, on Google or other places. And there's always like top 20 podcasts. And also, I also write podcast reviews, so you can check out our website at ypl.org. I did some podcast reviews, so you can also take a look there.